Tragedy in Hong Kong this Wednesday night, where a deadly inferno engulfed several high-rises.
The fire was spreading to nearby buildings.
What may have caused the flames to quickly accelerate? Breaking news in America's capital. 2 National Guard members are shot near the White House. Here in Canada, a financial lifeline from the federal government.
Our investments are also protecting workers.
The plan to strengthen steel and lumber industries. Plus, changes are a brewing for America's oldest brewing school. Why it's relocating to Canada.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with a terrible fire that's engulfed high-rise apartment buildings in Hong Kong and burned for hours, trapping some people in their apartments. At least 44 people are known to have been killed and hundreds of firefighters responded. Images from the scene show the scale of the inferno and the unimaginable grief. The flames moved so fast, not everyone could escape. Authorities say almost 300 people are unaccounted for. It happened in Tai Po, a suburban area north of downtown Hong Kong, near the border with mainland China. Authorities say they've arrested 3 people on the suspicion of manslaughter. Redmond Shannon has our top story tonight.
The fire broke out just before 3 p.m. in one of 8 buildings in this Hong Kong residential complex. Flames quickly jumped to 6 of the other blocks, apparently via the bamboo scaffolding and mesh being used during a renovation project. More than 700 firefighters were deployed, but the intensity of the flames only grew. Many of the around 4,000 residents watching in disbelief and agony. This man believed his wife was trapped inside. Jason Kong says he managed to call a friend inside who told him he couldn't get out.
The temperature inside the buildings concerned are very high, so it's quite difficult for us to enter the building and go upstairs to conduct firefighting and rescue operation.
In the early hours, the region's chief executive John Lee announced what Hong Kongers had feared. Many more confirmed dead, including a firefighter, and hundreds unaccounted for, although there can often be confusion about who is missing immediately after a large residential fire. Lee's government had begun the process of phasing out the use of traditional but flammable bamboo scaffolding earlier this year. That may now be accelerated. The spread of flames on the building's exterior similar to a deadly fire in Shanghai 15 years ago. A task force has been set up to investigate the initial cause. Police have arrested 3 men on suspicion of manslaughter in connection with the blaze. Many of those left homeless are staying in shelters for now, in a city where housing is in notoriously short supply. Redmond Shannon, Global News, London.
There's been a shooting near the White House in Washington, D.C. 2 National Guardsmen are reported to be in critical condition after what authorities say appeared to be a targeted shooting. A suspect is in custody. Our Washington Bureau Chief Jackson Proskow is following developments. Jackson.
Well, Donna, to set the scene for you, this happened at 2:17 p.m., just about a block away from the White House, outside the entrance to a subway station. Police say the suspect approached 2 National Guard members who were on patrol and shot at them. At some point, there was an exchange of gunfire, and the suspect was also hit. Eyewitness video shows bystanders and other police in the area responding and trying to render aid to the 2 wounded guardsmen. Listen to how bystanders jumped into action upon hearing those gunshots.
The individual, the suspect, came around the corner. He immediately started firing a firearm at the 2 National Guard members. So at that time, there were other National Guard members that were in the area. They heard the gunfire. They actually were able to intervene and to kind of hold down the suspect after he had been shot on the ground until law enforcement got there within moments.
Now, police say there are no other suspects involved. The National Guard, of course, has been patrolling Washington, D.C. on orders of President Donald Trump, who recently extended their deployment until February. It has been controversial, though, and some members of the Guard have previously reported receiving threats, but nothing like this has happened to date. Just last week, a federal judge ruled that the deployment of the Guard in D.C. was illegal, and the judge actually noted that there was a substantial risk of a dangerous or deadly encounter that could be catastrophic for public safety. After this horrible attack, President Donald Trump has asked for an additional 500 members of the Guard to be deployed in Washington while appealing that court order. Donna?
All right, Jackson Proskow on that shooting in Washington, D.C. Thanks. Canada's Prime Minister says he will go to Washington next week, but it's not for formal trade talks with President Trump. Mark Carney will be there for the FIFA World Cup soccer draw because Canada is a host country. President Trump will be there too. Last weekend, Carney brushed off a question about how often he's been talking to Trump. Today, he was a little more forthcoming, saying he communicated with the president yesterday, but that it was brief and not newsworthy.
I don't want to over-signal thing. This is something I'm trying to, what matters is the negotiations when they re-engage. They haven't re-engaged yet, so that's the fundamental point.
What Carney did want to talk about today is new measures he's putting in place to support Canada's steel and lumber industries, both suffering because of the unresolved trade war with the U.S. Mackenzie Gray explains what's planned and the reaction.
Bumped into the mayor of Tariffs.
It's the latest Liberal billion-dollar plan to band-aid over ailing parts of the Canadian economy.
We must protect our workers and our industries who are most exposed to U.S. tariffs.
That means steel and lumber, with the Prime Minister announcing a bevy of new policies, including additional cuts to quotas of imports of steel from outside the U.S. and Mexico. Welcome news for the head of one of Canada's largest steel companies.
Most of what we heard today isn't about us exporting to other countries or jurisdictions in the world. It's about unfairly traded product coming into Canada unabated and being able to address that.
That really means addressing China, who Canadian steel producers and the U.S. government have said for years is dumping excess capacity into Canada. But after meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping last month, the Prime Minister isn't worried about additional retaliation, despite current Chinese tariffs on Canadian canola and pork.
There's a series of important issues on the agricultural side, the seafood side. There's opportunities for Canada on the lumber side, et cetera, et cetera. And so those discussions will continue.
Carney hoping to make additional opportunities for Canadian steel companies by putting a 25% tariff on things like wind towers, prefabricated buildings, fasteners, and wires. Duties that will apply to the U.S. The first time since the election, Carney has implemented tariffs that could hit American companies. The Prime Minister wouldn't say if he raised that with Trump or even what he discussed with the President when they last spoke.
It's my exchange with the President yesterday was not newsworthy.
So it wasn't about...
I just responded to a question, wasn't newsworthy.
The Liberals also announcing an additional $500 million in government-backed loans for ailing softwood lumber companies, and promising to subsidize rail shipping rates on Canadian softwood and steel for domestic buyers by 50%.
This isn't going to disappear with Donald Trump. So we need to make the adjustment to incorporating this transaction cost, this cost of business, going forward.
BC Premier David Eby had asked Ottawa for softwood lumber help, but he likely won't like Carney's next announcement on Thursday in Calgary, Donna, when the Prime Minister will sign a memorandum of understanding with the Alberta government over a potential new pipeline.
Okay, Mackenzie Gray in Ottawa, thanks. The extra support is welcome for those in Canada's struggling softwood lumber industry, but they caution it is not a long-term solution. Heidi Petrachik has reaction from those most affected and why they say the relief they really need feels out of reach.
In British Columbia, where forestry supports more than 100,000 jobs, the extra 45% in taxes slapped on most Canadian softwood lumber going to the U.S. is causing pain.
There's a mill on the island, Shemanis, that hasn't ran for 4 months.
And so news of more help from Ottawa, including bumping up income replacement benefits to 70% for affected workers, is welcome. But the union representing 14,000 forestry workers in Canada adds supports need to roll out as soon as possible.
These industries, for the most part, aren't in Vancouver or Toronto or Montreal. They are in the small communities. And so they're often the only industry in town.
The group representing Canada's forest products industry agrees.
We need to make sure the funding support programs the Prime Minister announced actually will flow. That's the key. Devil in the details.
In New Brunswick, the extra $500 million from the federal government for softwood lumber loan guarantees is seen as some help.
But private woodlots are composed
a third of the woodlots in New Brunswick. And whether any of this trickles down to the private producer is probably doubtful.
Softwood lumber from Nova Scotia is excluded from U.S. duties, but there's still the 10% tariff and tumbling softwood prices, which have dropped roughly 25% in several months.
The uncertainty, where we are today, where we might be tomorrow, is really harming markets on both sides of the border.
There's not one thing the Prime Minister can announce today other than a negotiated settlement with the U.S. that's going to bring some sense of order here.
The Prime Minister called these extra measures a bridge to the future, but acknowledged there's no firm timeline for getting back to trade talks with U.S. President Donald Trump. Heidi Petracek, Global News, Halifax.
The president of the Coastal First Nations in British Columbia says an oil pipeline to BC's north coast will never happen. And she blasted the federal government for negotiating a possible deal with Alberta without First Nations at the table. Throughout this process, we have been met with a wall of silence from the federal government, says Marilyn Slett, whose group represents nearly a dozen First Nations along BC's coast. She says while details of this memorandum of understanding remain to be seen, under no circumstances can it override our inherent and constitutional rights and title. Prime Minister Carney is set to unveil his plans in Calgary tomorrow. Serious talk of a new pipeline, even if it's years from being built, has many in the oil and gas sector hopeful. Heather Urix-West looks at the anticipation in Alberta.
It's kind of thrilling to see government act.
His tone may be measured, but make no mistake, this energy sector CEO is excited about what's ahead when it comes to Canadian oil and gas.
I'm thrilled. I have kids and grandkids now. I'm thrilled for them. You're a young person. I'm thrilled for you. Why would we sit on these resources and not maximize them?
On Thursday, the Prime Minister will be in Calgary to speak to the business community after signing a memorandum of understanding with the Alberta government, widely expected to clear the path for a new oil pipeline to the northern BC coast.
It's something we've been waiting for a long time. You know, we've got new LNG projects happening in BC, but if we can't get product out of Alberta over to BC or over to the United States, there's no good in keeping it in the ground.
So far, there has been no interest from industry in building a new pipeline, with rules like the North Coast oil tanker ban and the oil sector emissions cap on the books. It's hoped Thursday's memorandum of understanding will see significant carve-outs to these rules in a bid to attract private cash for not only a new pipeline project, but expansions in production as well.
We will see a proponent come forward when the oil producers actually have the confidence they need from what's announced to start thinking about how they increase production to fill the pipeline.
In what appears to be a new era of partnership with Ottawa, industry groups and the Alberta government are now turning their focus to winning over opponents in BC, including coastal First Nations. Alberta's Indigenous Affairs Minister says initial conversations have been productive and more meetings are planned for next month. Donna?
Heather Urix-West in Calgary. Thanks. Environment Canada is changing the way it issues weather alerts. It's moving to a color-coded system to help Canadians quickly understand the severity of extreme weather. Yellow alerts mean hazardous weather may cause damage, disruption, or have health impacts in your area. Orange alerts mean more widespread damage that could last for days. And red alerts, expected to be rare, warn of very dangerous and possibly life-threatening weather. Historical red events include the 1998 ice storm in Ontario and Quebec, the 2020 Snowmageddon that buried St. John's, Newfoundland, and the 2021 atmospheric river that caused severe damage in BC. U.S. tariffs have created headaches for many Canadian businesses. Coming up, how some of them are turning to artificial intelligence for help. The Olympic flame has begun its journey to the Winter Games in Milan and Cortina, Italy, but without its usual outdoor spectacle. Bad weather in Greece forced organizers to light the torch indoors using a backup flame from an earlier rehearsal. The relay now heads towards Italy for a 63-day run across the country as preparations continue for the Games in February. It is Italy's third time hosting the Olympics. Pope Leo will begin a 6-day visit to Turkey and Lebanon on Thursday, his first foreign trip since being elected in May. Preparations are underway in Istanbul, Pope Leo's first stop. He'll attend several events with the spiritual leader of the world's 260 million Orthodox Christians and visit the city's famed Blue Mosque. Peace is expected to be a key theme in Lebanon, which has the largest percentage of Christians in the Middle East. The Pope will host an interreligious meeting there and lead an outdoor mass in Beirut. Campbell's Soup Company has fired an executive after he was accused in a lawsuit of calling the company's products unhealthy and mocking the people who eat them. Campbell's says it has determined a recording of Martin Bali, the company's vice president of IT, to be authentic. The audio was presented as part of a wrongful termination lawsuit. On it, Bali is reportedly heard going on an expletive-filled rant, allegedly calling the company's products shit for poor people and making racist remarks about Indian employees. Campbell says the comments were vulgar, offensive, and false, and we apologize for the hurt they've caused. The former worker behind the lawsuit says he was fired after reporting the behavior. Tariff tracker ahead: how AI is helping Canadian small businesses navigate the changing trade landscape. Businesses across Canada have cited ever-changing tariffs and trade turbulence as the single biggest challenge they've faced this year. A Toronto-based artificial intelligence startup recognized that early on and quickly developed a chatbot and platform to help. And Gaviola explains how it helps and why it's needed.
Toy Traders in Langley, BC has been in the business for decades. The biggest challenge this year, tariffs and trade concerns driving up prices and limiting supply.
Behind me, in certain sections of the store, we have signs up where it says limit 1 per family or 1 per customer.
All of these challenges mean no Black Friday or Boxing Day sales this season.
A lot of the toys that involve metal and wood have gone up a lot in price because of those key components, obviously, and the costs. So we are just glad to have the inventory, but we can't obviously put it on sale.
U.S. President Donald Trump's ever-changing rules for importers and exporters have thrown a series of curveballs at business owners across Canada. Smaller businesses in particular have less resources, less ability to revamp supply chains, and in most cases, less of a cash cushion. Toronto-based startup Tariffs was created to help.
I think people have got used to it, but still the rate of change is so rapid that almost even like trade professionals who have decades of experience in this space are falling behind the regulations.
Tariffs' platform and chatbot pulls from the latest tariff rules and guides users through the new, more complicated documentation process, helping to get everything in order so companies can submit paperwork to U.S. Customs.
Have more visibility into the customs process, identify any errors or mismatches before they actually hit customs, automate their tasks, and basically take control of the process.
Navigating all of this has been intense for BC-based cabinetry company Norelco.
I was here throughout the entire time of COVID. This is more difficult. It's happening faster.
Its wood cabinets entering the U.S. from Canada have been slapped with 25% tariffs, soon to be 50% on January 1st.
It is requiring all our efforts to be able to sort of keep up with the new rules and regulations and what's being expected of us to export.
Anne Gaviola, Global News, Toronto.
A hop across the border next, why America's oldest brewing school is moving to Canada. A sea turtle whose medical plight went viral online has been released back into the wild. Molly, the loggerhead sea turtle, was discovered by a boat captain. She was entangled in a crab trap line and had a basketball-sized tumor on her neck. Veterinarians felt she had little chance of survival, but after multiple surgeries and 3 months of recovery, Molly beat the odds and regained her independence today. Molly has a tracker installed on her shell so you can follow her movements live online. Fewer Canadians are going to the U.S. these days, but this next story is about a U.S. company choosing to move north. The oldest beer brewing school in the U.S. that's been based in Chicago for more than 150 years is moving its operation to Montreal. Mike Armstrong explains why.
The name Siebel might not be recognized by most. It's not a giant of the American brewing industry like Busch, Pabst, or Coors. But those are all names of families that sent members to learn the craft at the Siebel Institute of Technology.
We wouldn't really have the American kind of brewing industry, let alone the craft beer industry, really, without Siebel.
The Institute was founded in Chicago way back in 1872 by German immigrant Dr. John Ewald Siebel.
When you are finished spiking.
For more than a century and a half, it's been training brewers from across the U.S. and around the world. It's not just the oldest brewing school, but one of the most prestigious. Well, Chicago is losing what some consider a part of its identity.
Certainly was a really difficult thing to learn about, and definitely disappointed and saddened.
Now, Siebel was bought by L'Allemand Incorporated, a Canadian yeast company, back in 2000. But why move 25 years later? In a press release this week, Siebel's general manager says it's gotten too challenging for international students to attend.
We're tough and we're smart.
The Trump administration is tightening rules for student visas, it says, to end foreign student visa abuse. But it is part of a wider push.
It's all industries, it's all immigrants, regardless of what the reasoning is for being here.
Siebel's new home will be this building in East End, Montreal. Allemand says it will also set up a new baking academy next door. And while the brewing industry in the U.S. is reeling from the news, it's being welcomed in the Institute's new home.
It's fun to know that this renowned institution wants to set up shop here and was attracted by the beer culture that we already have.
There are other brewery programs in Canada, but landing Siebel, many hope, will be a shot in the arm for the industry in Quebec. Meantime, January of next year is last call in Chicago. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
That is Global National for this Wednesday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada showcases this patriotic quilt in Powell River, BC, a boy tree in Chance Harbour, New Brunswick, and Little Whitefish Lake in Humphrey, Ontario. Please keep them coming. Send your pictures of Canadian pride to globalnational@globalnews.ca. And thanks for watching. Hope to see you here again tomorrow. Bye-bye.